All right, guys, I don't want to give you the whole story all at once just because I want you to read the book, but I want to give you some spoilers to feel like you're getting your money's worth on some things here. So I'm going to give you a preview to the background story that is Mirov. So the book is called Mirov, M-I-R-O-V, M-I-R-O-V. The name comes from a poem, a Russian poem called Shredi Mirov, means worlds. Shredi Mirov, the other name means amongst the worlds. I can post the poem, I guess, in the Patreon timeline. Anyway, here's the background story, the stuff that happens before the movie or the book starts. I always call it a movie because in my mind it still is. When I was a kid, it was a movie. This idea was in my head that a movie would become a book because of necessity, because I can't afford a $300 million movie. Anyway, so the background is this. Years ago, by the way, this is an alternate reality. RoboCop, for instance, RoboCop never says what year it took place, right? So when you watch, RoboCop was made in 1987, and when you watch that movie, it feels contemporary and futuristic at the same time, which I loved. I always thought that was the best way to do it. But it feels really real and lived in. So yeah, you've got robots, but you also got this really dirty world too at the same time, right? So it feels like that to me how the future really is going to be, right? The future won't be clean and like the Jetsons or something like that. The future will be dirty and lived in, and you'll have an overlap of old stuff, archaic with new, right? They'll overlap, just like when I love the time period where you had cars and horses at the same time. And let's see, like the Old West was kind of dying away, the New World was beginning, whatever, like the Wild Bunch and those kind of things. Those are really cool ideas of movies. Red Dead Redemption 2, or the Red Dead Redemption games, rather, sort of take a place kind of in that area. I think there's a movie called The Proposition that was like that as well. Anyway, I digress. That to me is how the future really works: is you have an overlap, right? So in this world, you have space stations and deep space freighters and spaceships, but you also have microwaves and guns with bullets and right. So gasoline engines. All this is all at the same time. Okay, so that's this world, just like RoboCop. So mankind has broadened its reach. We're colonizing Mars. And we have all this deep space exploration, but we finally run across the other guys. That we've run into a neighbor, right? And the aliens meet us somewhere in deep space, and unprovoked, we just see them and meet them, and then they attack us and kill and blow up a station, kill a bunch of people. So this event is kind of a Pearl Harbor 9/11 type event. And it was a mad scramble amongst the astronomers to find out where those aliens came from. And this astronomer does so. And being how, traditionally whoever discovers something in space gets to name it, he's given the opportunity to name the alien species. And since it's a 9/11 Pearl Harbor type event, his rationale is, well, whatever word we associate with these aliens will become hated and become vile. So I'll make my own name bear that burden. So no other word will have to carry that heavy weight. So his last name is Rubary, Rubary. And so he names the aliens after his own last name, Rubary. So the aliens become the Rubary. So in response to this violent encounter with the Rubary, the world's governments create Unidom to be the bureaucracy to sort of coordinate all of our efforts against this common threat. So Unidom is put in charge of all of the space stations, all the space colonies, Mars, all that stuff falls under Unidom's purview. And Unidom is set up with a governor who is a lifetime appointee. And that governor is the end all be all for in terms of Unidom and what it controls. So you have basically a one rule of all that, okay? But he ultimately reports to the world's government, so there is a step up. There are steps above him. He's not unchecked. He's not a dictator, but he is the ultimate authority for And the idea is that you need clarity. You don't have time for debate. We're talking about the survival of the species, kind of like the Dark Knight. They would give one Dark Knight all the authority to make these choices to defend the city. Kind of the same concept. So that's the structure, the political structure that's created to combat the aliens. Within Unidom, there's created its own intelligence agency, just like you would have the CIA for the U.S., KGB for Russia, Mossad for Israel, MI5 for England, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The DOI, Department of Intelligence, is created for Unidom, and they are the ones that go around and police and enforce this rule. So they're on vigil to find the alien threat. They're on vigil to make sure nobody's sabotaging the world's efforts. Okay. And they have almost like game warden type authorities where, game warden can enter a property, without warrant. DOI have a similar type of authority. They can do what they need necessary to protect civilization. So if they've got to come into your space station and kick ass and take names to get you back in line, they have that authority. This all takes place over the course of decades and decades and decades prior to the opening of the novel. So you've got 100 years at least. I can't remember exactly how many years I put between the beginning of the novel and the alien encounter, but in my mind, this is something that spans over a century. This is something this is not like a 10-year history here. This is decades, right? So here we are in 2022, and we're still dealing with the after effects of the turn of the century of the 1900s. Okay, with communism, its rise and fall, and Marxism and things like that, and even World War II. The ripple effect of World War II is still felt to this day. Thus, World War I are felt to this day. Anyway, so it's like that. These things just sort of have built and built and built and built and built. So Unidom's headquarters is in Houston. My thinking was, well, if NASA is kind of the end-all be-all for space in the U.S., and the UN is kind of the end-all be-all for these world government in New York, well, we would just put the Unidom in where the kind of the end-all be-all for space is in Houston. So it come from there. And then also, but I like the idea that the U.S. would no longer, maybe it's just me, but the U.S. has always sort of been New York and L.A., right? With a little bit of Washington, D.C. in the middle. And I always thought that was kind of bullshit, especially with movies and with stories and stuff. It's like, there's a whole lot more to the U.S. than New York and L.A. So I wanted to put it in Houston, one for NASA, and then two, like, there should be a true third coast to the United States. You got the New York Atlantic, LA Pacific. Well, let's do Houston and the Gulf as true third coast Mecca power seat. And so they built what is the Unidom Towers, these twin towers there in Houston, to be the symbol and the practical leadership headquarters for Unidom. And so the Unidom Towers are symbolic of the unification of the world, and they're also, like I said, a practical spot for the bureaucracy of Unidom. And so now the power seat is the governor in Unidom, who reports to the UN in New York, and he coordinates the global efforts to fight against the Rabari. And the network of humans is Mars, deep space colonies, deep space stations, spaceships, deep space ships all around everywhere. And he's in charge of that, with his DOI as his fingers stretched out. And there's been multiple governors before the governor that we're going to see. And this book will save him for another video. But that is the background world building for the book Mirov. I could go into more, but I think I'll leave it at that. That just gives you the power structure, the history and power structure of what's going on. Mars has its own government. but ultimately reports to Unidom. Each space colony or station is the same way. Unidom is the power factor, power structure for anything not Earth based. So that is the background world building of